Hey everybody, it's Buzz. How are you doing there? I wanted to ask my atheist buddies a question. And the reason why I ask this is because a lot of the feedback that I hear from the atheist community is just what they think Christianity is wrong. It's spot on wrong, and I've been wondering, like, where are people getting this information? And I'm going to do a series of videos to clarify some things that you need to understand you got wrong. And we're not talking about the existence of God. We understand, but we don't agree with that. But the ideas that you have on doctrine, Christian doctrine, is usually just wrong. It's not sound. And I've been wondering where you get this stuff from. I mean, from where you're getting your information from, heck, if I was getting my information from those sources, I probably wouldn't be a Christian either. So I wanted to challenge you a little bit about where you get your information from on theism and on, particularly Christian doctrine and thought. Okay? Little story here. When I first became a Christian, I was someone who didn't really want Christianity to ever be true. I used to mock Christians a lot, actually. And what happened with me is a guy who I knew and respected, very smart guy, great businessman. He ended up giving me a book. It was written by Josh McDowell. It's called More Than a Carpenter. Okay. And he said, read it. And so I was like, all right, I'll read it. I was a big reader. I just never read anything like that before. And once I finished that book, that was the first time that I had ever been exposed to a persuasive, scholarly look into the Bible and Christianity. Up until that point, I never thought there was anything to it. I figured everything was on blind faith and that you had to be basically out of your mind to believe that stuff. Now, that opened my eyes. I had no idea that there was all these people. Now, Josh McDowell was a guy who was an atheist, and he was a scholar. He was writing his master's thesis on disproving Christianity. And in the course of doing it, he went to original sources to tear it apart. And in the process of doing it, ended up becoming a Christian. Very, very reluctant Christian. But see, that happens to a lot of people. And so with all this in mind, I'm wondering what kind of primary sources you all have. So to continue on with my story, that was a little rabbit trail about Josh McDowell. When I first finished reading his book, it was a few weeks later that there was an epiphany of sorts, and very much an experience with God that I could never explain to someone, but it all happened, and I became a Christian. So that was probably around the age of 28, 29, something like that. And I started reading just a lot of books by Josh McDowell and other apologists like him. Then someone had given me a book that they didn't realize even what it was. They thought they were giving me a book that I would enjoy. It was the best-selling book in their church, and it was written by the same people who developed basically the Jesus seminars. And these are people who consider themselves Christians, but they don't consider miracles to be real. They don't consider the Jesus of history to be the same as the Christ of later myth. So in their mind's eye, over the years after Jesus died, he never rose again. And then there was a myth that ended up coming around by the Christians to turn him into this Messiah, the Christ. But that's not who he was. And so that's what this book was all about. And it was scholarly. It was written by scholars. A lot of these were Ivy League schools, but these were some bigwigs. And they set out to give a very, very persuasive book about why they believe what they believe. And by the time I finished that book, not knowing what I was getting myself into, I start reading it. I'm like, oh, where are they going with this? By the time I finished the book, I'm like, holy moly, man, there's some serious doubt on my faith right now. So I remember going to the leaders of my church and saying, I got to take a break from the church and from Christian thought here, because these people have some pretty good points, and I need to hear out everything that they have to say from their mouths, essentially. So I bought their books, I bought their writings, and looked into what they had to say from their point of view. Now, I ended up coming through that eventually and staying as an evangelical Christian, but it took a while, and I took the challenge head on, because truth to me is not what I want truth to be. It is what is truth. Truth is outside of me, and I just want to know what that is, and whatever that is, follow that. So that's always been my goal. And so I didn't feel scared about investigating what they had, because I'd feel more scared about following something that wasn't true. I don't want to devote my life to something that's not true. That'd be ridiculous. Like Paul said in Corinthians, the book of Corinthians, he said, Christ never rose from the dead. We're to be pitied more than all men, because we've believed in a lie. And so that's the way I took it from the beginning, is just whatever is the truth, that's what I want to know. And so I ended up coming through it, like I said, believing eventually back into the what mainstream evangelical thought would believe about Jesus and the Bible, the inerrancy of the Bible, Jesus being who he said he is, and that he is the Christ. Okay, so, but I had to go to original sources, and that's my challenge right now for my atheist friends out there. Have you ever really read a book? First of all, have you ever read through the Bible? Secondly, have you ever read through some of these, books? I mean, I had to read through, like Resurrection, Myth or Reality by Reverend Spong. I mean, he's a famous bishop who doesn't believe in the resurrection. So I read to see what he had to think. Here's a book from the Jesus seminars, the 5 Gospels, and they basically rewrote the Bible with what they believed Jesus actually said and what he didn't say and all that kind of stuff, and plus some other books that they wrote. Here's a book called The Cross and the Crescent. It's a very scholarly work by a Harvard professor who used to be a Christian and became a Muslim, and it's his best attempt to persuade people that the Bible and Christianity is ridiculous and that Islam would be the way to go. But, it would be very easy for me to have just gone to my evangelical, scholarly cloud of teachers out there and found out what they said about what skeptics are saying. But instead, I just went to the skeptics and read their stuff. Then once I read their stuff, then I went to the evangelical scholars who studied this stuff and compared what everyone had to say, okay, and gave full weight to everything. And I'm wondering if you've ever done that. Have you ever taken time off from what you believe and actually put yourself through the challenge of reading the primary sources of Christian thought and theist thought? Or are you just basically listening to, the people who you already agree with and getting their viewpoint on these sticky issues? So I just want to challenge you to get out of your comfort zone and read from the horse's mouth what some of these Christian apologists are saying. Not just getting on a website. Go out and buy a book. Read the book. Okay? Don't get on a website that you can read what they say, but you're also at the same time reading what the critics have to say. Okay? That's not going to do it either. Take some time. When I listen to C-SPAN, I love it because I get both sides of the story. I can find out what people really believe by hearing it right from them, not hearing it from someone who's telling me what they believe, what the other people are believing. Because that's that's what we all end up doing. We fall into our own little holy huddle, whether the holy huddle is your atheist friends or for theist or theist friends. You got to be out there and challenge yourself on, getting the primary source information and seeing where everything goes. And if what you believe is true, it will bear itself out after a while. Then you'll know. So, I always tell people, hey, there's a chance I'm wrong. And that's why I do listen to what people say. And I investigate it. Always have. I just want to challenge you guys to do the same thing. So, get out there and do the hard work. Do the heavy lifting here. Because I'm not throwing down Pascal's wager, but I am saying if what you believe is wrong, it's a big deal. If what I believe is wrong, it's a big deal because I'd be devoting my life to a bunch of garbage. So how pathetic would that be? Y'all have a good one. Study around, study away. Bye-bye now.